Tired of spending days leveling up Pokémon to 100 for the Battle Frontier? Or spending months hunting for a shiny, only for the wrong one to show up in the end? Or that rock climb still doesn't exist in that game? Well, today we're going to look at the best trick from each generation of Pokémon. Now, first generation tricks don't go as far as making a Gen 3 Pokémon spawn out of nowhere. But as you already know, these games are riddled with programming loopholes that can be exploited for results worthy of a god's miracle. Literally. The trick to walk through walls in the first generation was discovered ages ago, nicknamed Brock Through Walls. All you had to do was have the menu cursor ready on save, and when you were intercepted by the kid outside of Pewter City, the one who takes you to Brock's gym to make sure you don't leave town without the badge, you had to skip his dialogue with the B button, and as soon as his text box closed, immediately press start, save, and reset. If you did it correctly, when you restart, his event will trigger again, he'll leave, and you'll be able to continue your adventure. Which is already really useful for skipping the gym and saving time, but if you change routes, the NPC will return to his original position. And if at that point we check the stats of a Bulbasaur at exactly this level and with these moves and PPs, the game breaks and we're pushed out of the map's boundaries, letting us walk over mountains, rivers, and buildings. Bulbasaur is the best starter even for stuff like this. It's mind-blowing. This trick is older than AZ, but until now it's just been a funny curiosity without much real use. But recently, it was discovered that by using this method, you can enter Mount Moon through the exit and fulfill a dream we all had as kids, humiliating this guy and taking both fossils. Now, in the second generation, there's a trick that many of you probably know, to get a shiny Ditto by using the time capsule to send the red Gyarados to the first generation. Even though it was a bit complicated and required trading, it was worth trying, since in that generation this creature was a real treasure. Because of how shinies worked, breeding with a shiny would greatly increase the chances of the offspring being shiny too. But not all of us had a link cable back then. In fact, hardly anyone did. And what if I told you there's a completely legal, legitimate trick, no glitches needed, to get that broken Ditto that breeds shinies in these games? It's actually pretty simple, though not exactly easy since it does take some time. But it's definitely much faster and more efficient than trying to catch a shiny Ditto the normal way. We already talked in another video about the curious messages the game gives us when we leave two Pokemon at the daycare, specifically one of them. It's brimming with energy. When these words appear, the Pokemon for no apparent reason, and even if they're supposedly compatible, won't be able to breed. This message mainly shows up when you try to have two shiny Pokemon produce an egg, something the game prevents you from doing. Think about it. If having just one shiny parent already makes it much easier for the offspring to be shiny in these games, then if two shiny Pokemon could have an egg, it would practically guarantee it, letting the player break the system completely and breed shinies effortlessly, which would dramatically devalue their rarity. But that's just scratching the surface. In reality, the game doesn't just prohibit breeding two shiny Pokemon, but rather two Pokemon with shiny genes. Combinations of DVs that, whether or not the Pokemon is shiny, greatly increase the chances of having an offspring with that trait. There you have it. All you have to do is leave the red Gyarados at the daycare and go wild catching Dittos on the nearby route. Then, just leave them one by one at the daycare with Gyarados and talk to the attendant. If the game gives you the message, it's brimming with energy. It means that Ditto, even if it looks normal, has shiny genes, and in practice, it will work like a shiny parent, letting you have offspring with any other Pokemon at that super boosted shiny rate. Now let's move on to the third generation, where, with the Battle Frontier demanding you have several powerful teams, we're probably going to need to grind and train more than in any other game. Diabolically, they didn't include the Versus Seeker from Fire Red and Leaf Green, which would have been so useful for this, leaving us limited to the occasional rematches from the Pokénav, and boy did I make use of them as a kid. For some reason, I especially remember overusing the people on this route, battling them over and over again, but having to wait for their rematch to activate randomly is a pretty primitive way to farm. Here's a hidden trick in this game, way more convenient and superior to training with the Versus Seeker, even better than with the Pokemon League, someone who already gets treated pretty badly in the game, so I guess it doesn't matter to humiliate him a little more. Wally. Wally awaits the end of the Pokémon League, and it is commonly and widely known that in the game, he has several rematches available with even stronger teams that give more experience each time, encouraging us to break his dreams and hopes again and again. Because I guess Game Freak hates green-haired people and always has to make their lives a drama. But what not many people know is that we don't have to wait for his rematch to appear randomly, and that it's actually incredibly easy to trigger. After you defeat Wally, all you have to do is walk 255 steps, and then 31% of the times you enter his cave, his rematch will be activated. So if we run around for a few extra seconds near the entrance and go in and out several times, it's almost completely guaranteed that he'll challenge us, making it truly the ultimate farming spot, with nearly endless battles against strong and powerful Pokémon that give a lot of experience, making it easily one of the very best training methods in the entire history of the series. Or, if you prefer, you can always go to the battle tower and clone rare candies like a madman, but don't blame me if something goes wrong. All in all, it's a pretty harmless trick, and I think they left it there on purpose. The complete opposite of the trick from the 4th generation, one of the most dramatic mistakes Game Freak has ever made, resulting in a trick so powerful it's actually creepy, and they've tried to cover it up. When I first heard about this years ago, I couldn't believe something like this could be done on the original cartridge, but that's exactly what the cute charm glitch is. And what if I told you that this ability, which outside of battle increases the chance of encountering a Pokemon of the opposite gender, can be exploited so that the 0.01% chance of finding shinies in that generation is multiplied by 2,000, turning it into a 20% chance. The craziest part of all is that, technically speaking, it's not even a glitch, but rather an RNG manipulation. So maybe somewhere out there in the world, someone just happened to get lucky and ended up with a game where 1 out of every 5 Pokemon is shiny. And you only need 3 things: a Pokemon with cute charm at the very front of your party that has a clearly defined gender, male or female, and a game with a specific trainer ID number and secret ID. To simplify the whole explanation, in this generation, cute charm had an out-of-battle effect that made it more likely for wild Pokemon to be the opposite gender, and it did this by greatly limiting the combinations of secret IDs for the wild Pokemon that appear, and shinies also depend on that secret ID. So, if you manage to get a saved game with a certain combination of your IDs, you can force 1 out of every 5 wild Pokemon you encounter when you have a Pokemon with cute charm at the front to be shiny. To avoid making this video boring with complicated and technical explanations, if you want to know more, I invite you to look for specialized videos on the topic. Because yes, it's possible to do this on an original cartridge, so those shinies will be 100% legal and can be transferred to the current generations without any problem. And on top of that, this crazy trick works in all the 4th generation games. It's no wonder they rushed to fix it starting with the 5th generation. But this one has its own tricks too. I think by now it's pretty clear what I think about the 5th generation. Now, it's the most mainstream thing in the world to put it on a pedestal, but I've been fighting for it with my friends ever since the first time I finished Pokemon White on my old beat-up DS Lite and was blown away. But if there's one thing that really puts a damper on the almost perfect experience of Black and White, it's those seemingly endless sections where you have to fight half of Team Plasma over and over again. Of course, this isn't something exclusive to this generation, but this time it definitely feels a lot heavier in a story so intense that it gets interrupted by these moments. But did you know you can skip most of those grunts as if you were invisible? Welcome to the Plasma Skip, discovered by speedrunners out of necessity. In these games, if you trigger a dust cloud, the same ones that cause rare Pokemon to appear in caves, right between you and a trainer, that trainer won't notice you. This is because the game is programmed so that trainers won't spot you if a visual phenomenon is blocking their view. Black magic, but official. And the place where this phenomenon is most exploitable is without a doubt Chargestone Cave, right after the 5th badge, where a bunch of Team Plasma grunts are waiting in a row. And every 20 steps, there's a chance for one of these little clouds to appear. If you manage to carefully place it right in the middle, you can actually move forward without fighting any of them. Honestly, it takes some skill and a bit of practice to master these ninja arts, but it's worth trying because there's nothing more satisfying than seeing the grunt on duty turn around looking for a fight and trying to block your way, only to end up staring at a dust cloud while you keep moving forward. A 100% pacifist trick approved by N. Now, everyone will remember the original cloning glitch, probably the most legendary trick in the series, which back then you could only read about in underground 90s magazines or in weird forums with black backgrounds and neon letters. Well, grab your Game Boy, your Nintendo 3DS, because in XY, Game Freak tripped over the same stone again, decades later. Start a trade with a friend, pick a valuable Pokémon that you both want to clone, and offer in exchange a disposable Pokémon you're willing to sacrifice. Sorry, little guy. And when the screen says connecting, count exactly 4.5 eternal seconds. 3, 2, 1, click! If you did it right and the glitch gods are smiling on you, when you restart your game, you'll find that both players have an identical copy of the chosen Pokemon. And the other poor thing, I hope it has better luck in its next life. How is it possible that this happened again in such a similar way so many years later? Although, seeing how the circumstances are so different in the end, maybe, as some people say, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. Now, the next glitch will make you feel like the master of time in the peaceful Alola region. Do you remember Poképelago? That feature introduced in the 7th generation that let you do all sorts of activities with a Pokemon stored in your PC? Well, someone discovered one day that by simply changing the 3DS's date to after midnight, you could actually trick the game into thinking a whole day had passed in just a matter of seconds. Basically, turning yourself into the ruler of time in Alola. It's kind of like what we used to do back in the day by forcing honey trees to activate using the DS's internal clock, but infinitely more powerful, because with this method, tasks that used to be tedious are now a matter of seconds. Berries planted and ready to harvest. Pokemon with maxed out EVs out of nowhere. Eggs matured and hatching like popcorn. Now, can you imagine a Pokemon that just hatched from an egg already being evolved? Well, that's possible in Galar, as one of the simplest yet most surreal tricks in recent years. To pull it off, you just need a Pokemon that's about to evolve and right below it, an egg of the same species. What a lovely family picture of mother and child. But hold on, it's about to get weird. It turns out that if you give a rare candy to the mother Pokemon, but at the exact moment you confirm the action, you also press down on the joystick, the game gets confused. And then it applies the item's effect to the Pokemon that is inside the egg instead. That way, you can hatch a Pokemon that's already evolved and knows the moves it should have at that stage. Seriously, before I started making this video, I didn't expect to find such bizarre tricks, so reminiscent of the first generation, in the recent games. But here they are. How you choose to use this information is entirely up to you. I'm not taking any responsibility. Last but not least, in Scarlet and Violet, Koraidon and Miraidon are introduced as companions, who can explore Paldea with you at normal speeds. But with this glitch, they can reach supersonic speeds worthy of a Z warrior. All you have to do is climb a high mountain, start gliding, and then quickly alternate between falling and flying by repeatedly pressing the corresponding button. Each repetition gives you an extra speed boost, to the point where you can cross all of Paldea like a missile. You'll be able to travel across entire areas of the map in an instant, which was definitely not intended by the developers. If the game already runs choppy, doing this can lead to some pretty funny results.